All right. We're back for one more live stream by Lumino. This is the third week we're doing this. And I don't know if we're supposed to do this every week, but it's happening. It's happening. And it's a good thing. It's a good thing. And today we do have a photography legend. Just wait and see. Just wait, because today is a big deal. Before we go forward, let me just remind you all that you all that are on following us either on Facebook or YouTube that we are live and you can send your questions to our guests through the chat. So just use the chat to chat, but also to send your questions in because we're going to select a few for our guests tonight. Okay, and without talking more unnecessary things, I hand over to my friend Denise, executive director, executive producer at Lumino, so she can introduce our guest tonight. Denise, hi there.
Hello. Hello. It's impossible, Rodrigo, that anything that you could say could be unnecessary or could be termed unnecessary. So let's just get that out of the way.
Cut the crap. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
All right. Okay.
Hey, I
Take it
wanna
away.
welcome everybody to another fabulous installment of Lumino Presents. Tonight in our Lumino studios, we are very lucky, very, very lucky and appreciative to have photographer William Albert Allard. He has very graciously agreed to talk with us and take your questions about his illustrious career as a photographer for National Geographic. And before I bring him in, I will hand it over to our resident master photographer, Bill Carlson. You are the master photographer.
Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction.
That's true.
I happen to be very honored tonight to be able to have William Albert Allard on. I've been a tremendous fan of Bill Allard's all my life, and I've watched his career grow and blossom and to get even stronger now in later years. So what I'd love to do is introduce you to William Albert Allard and say hello to our gang here. This is Bill Allard. We're going to be talking for the balance of our evening. And we'd like to get it going for you. Say hello to the Illuminatis.
Yeah, the Illuminati.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bill and Denise. My pleasure being here. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, we'd like to jump right in because all of your images tell a story. And we'd like to hear some stories on some of your images tonight. And so we like to jump in with the first image. And what struck me about this, Bill, is that reflections play such a big part in your work. I've seen so much of it over the years. This particular one is so rich in texture and being part of your Parisian collection. I think it's probably got special interest and meaning for you. So
it does
go into it.
I really kind of consider this kind of my, for lack of a different word, kind of my little Parisian masterpiece, made from the belly of Le Calife, which was a dinner craft that toured the Seine River surrounding Paris. And of course, in this case, you see a good part of the Eiffel Tower. It had rained that day, so you've got these water droplets are sparkling almost like diamonds on the glass that enclose the upper part. And the figure of a woman who's come partway down the staircase. This is not one of those pictures where you have a lot of sister or like images. But in fact, for the majority of my work, they're really one moment. There's no almost accomplice photograph that I made shortly thereafter or before. And this has a lot of geometry to it, which I don't have the terminology to explain. I mean, there's triangles all over the place. There are lines that are intersecting and joining each other. And I felt very grateful to end up getting this picture. And I believe it ended up being the lead picture in my little essay on the Seine in National Geographic. It was made, I believe it was 2013 when I made this photograph.
Was it taken from outside the
No, I'm
facility?
inside the boat.
Okay.
I'm in the boat. I'm in the craft on a lower level. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, it looks like a Chagall, a Marc Chagall painting or tapestry. That's what I thought it was when I first saw it. And I thought, did we get the wrong collection work? But and I mean that as a compliment, because it
Well,
is
I'll take it as a
colorful, so
compliment.
beautiful.
I'll take it as a compliment.
Good.
I was going to say it's an Allard, actually.
And it's really a reflection also of my love for that particular city.
Oh, yes.
Now, I greatly regret that I don't speak French. Wish I did, because I miss out on so much when I don't hear what the people are speaking in their own language. But I do love the city, and feel very grateful to have been able to make this photograph.
You know, I was just thinking while you were talking, a question for you that's sort of an overarching question to all of your photographs. What must it feel like to see your work be appreciated by so many people at this stage in your career? I mean, it's almost like a continuous uptick. And
Well,
must...
excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt, but
No.
I've always had the pleasure of having a major audience working for National Geographic. When you have millions and millions of viewers, and that's always been a great pleasure to have that outlet. A lot of photographers don't have that. Now, of course, all the kids don't get to be in the parade. Anytime I would do an essay for National Geographic, the end result in terms of publishing for the magazine might be a dozen pictures out of hundreds or thousands that I made. Not thousands of one essay that were all that significant, but certainly a lot. But to have them help to be able to have that outlet and have it of that kind of quality, because photography, especially color, is all about reproduction. If you don't have good reproduction, those pictures the message is not going to get out. And we always had really good reproduction at National Geographic. So I was grateful to have that. And then when I did my books, which I've done 7, I guess, reproduction was always the real goal. And although I always say none of my books is a perfect book, but I'm proud of all of them. And of my last book, which is a book of my Paris pictures called Eye of the Flaneur, because that's what I've considered myself as, a flaneur who is someone who goes out and with no particular mission in mind, but marries oneself with the surroundings, what happens, making yourself open to whatever happens. And that's the way I was fortunate all those years, 50 years actually, for National Geographic, which I don't think anyone has or will accomplish that lengthy a career for that magazine. But I was gifted working for National Geographic by time. Time is absolutely the most important thing. It would allow me, and all my colleagues, David Allen Harvey, any number of them, I'm sure would agree with me. Time means that you can go into that cafe not just once, but twice, or once every day if you're working in an area. And sometimes it's as important for my subject to get to know me as it is for me to get to know the subject, at least to be familiar, to acceptance, you know. Access is always something everybody in the business. Oh, how can I get access? How can I get access? Well, once you've got access, that's fine. That's great. But that's not the end. Access is just that. What you really need is acceptance. Because once you're accepted, then the pictures are given to you. People start giving. Most of my really fine pictures were given to me. I can say I made them, but they were given to me. They allowed me into their space. They allowed me to continue to be themselves while I observed. And that's something I've always felt very, very grateful for. Didn't mean to go off on a tangent on that.
No, I was.
Acceptance is
yes.
everything.
Well,
It's a perfect tangent, and I didn't mean to interrupt. You had a thought you wanted.
Well, it's almost like in acting. You know, acting is actually not acting; it's reacting, and the power of one actor's performance can only be as good as the power of the other actor, because they're giving each other a certain energy. And so I'd never thought of photography in those terms. And so that's beautiful. I wanted to give you a French word, you know, since you want to speak French. A flaneur, if it were a female, it would be a flâneuse.
A flaneur.
Flâneuse.
Oh, I see. Well, thank you. I'll remember that.
So see, you know, I am the flâneuse, but you are a flaneur.
I like to think of myself as.
Well, let's
And I
flaneur
must
our
say
way.
that the French, I like the French, even all the waiters who get a bad rap. I like the French, and they've always liked my work. I've always been well accepted. And I was not that long ago, a year or two ago, given a Lifetime Achievement Award from Figaro in France. And that means a lot to me, a lot.
I bet it does. Well, Mr. Flaneur, let's go to the next image and see.
Okay.
Because people are sending in their comments. You know, it's like, forget about that, you know, boring couple in Minneapolis. Let's get to, you know, Bill Allard's images. So
Get on with it.
you're right.
I hope they're not saying that. But this, okay, but this is an interesting picture. What I have, every time I look at it, I can't quite figure it out. Because it was made in Peru. Peru was one of the real moments or times in my life where an assignment changed my life in many ways, professionally, personally, and it was a tremendous visual resource when I first came in. And I remember when the assignment that I heard at Geographic that they were going to do a Peru story. And something in my gut told me, I have to do that. I must get that assignment. I had been coming off a lot of work in the American West, whatever. And I didn't plan, I was never a good planner. I just kind of gravitated. And I knew I had to get this, and I did get the assignment. And this is one of the pictures I made in 1981, my first time in Peru. And I was in a small village near Cusco called Chincheros. And there was an archway on this street leading to an open market area where people would come in the morning. And I had watched the shadows. You know, photography is all about light and shadow, the color of light, maybe the color of the shadows. And I saw that the shadows from this archway were very interesting. And I made a few pictures earlier that were very nice, but I thought, you know, I think I can do better than that. And so I go back and forth as the day went by. And I found myself wedging myself into this little lower right, where you look at the lower right-hand corner. Now, actually, I don't see it on my screen, but there's a little bit of detail in the cobblestones in that shadow area in the image.
Mm-hmm.
But how the rest of that shadow took place, I to this day am not quite sure. But it really, really, really made that image very, very special to me. Very special. Yeah. Now that picture was made in Italy. That was I want to say, oh, I'm having a moment. Not Cremona, where the violins are. It's another city along the Po River, I believe. And it was a city where everyone rode bicycles, and you'd hear these whispery with the tires going by. It was incredible. And then again, I was under a kind of an archway that at a certain time would cast very interesting shadows and and geometric shapes, the circles, of course, in this case, the converging lines. Again, the geometry of making a photograph and taking a photograph and trying to basically make some order out of what begins as kind of chaos, if you will.
Was this image a cover image
No.
for National Geographic?
No, I don't know. It wasn't a cover. I had very few covers in my long career, 3 or 4 maybe, I can't remember. And I never thought of, I've got to make a cover picture. I never thought that way at all.
Well, that leads me to a question about pressure. You became quite successful almost immediately.
Mhm.
It seems when you joined.
Yeah, I was
with
lucky.
National Geographic. And did the pressure ever play a part in any of your work? I mean,
Not to my knowledge, but then maybe that was due to my own naivete. I don't know. I kind of came in over the transom. That was my first professional job, working for National Geographic. That just doesn't happen anymore.
No.
And it didn't it didn't really to speak of then.
Mhm.
But I lucked out. I went in with came in off the street with a portfolio from my 2 years of studying photography at the University of Minnesota with black and white portfolio. So I had seen earlier at the USIA agency, the man who was the head of photography for them, the late Yoshio Komodo, who I wasn't supposed to see. I was actually supposed to see someone at the Voice of America, because they'd sent this very charismatic man to the University of Minnesota to speak to us. And I was going to Washington from New York. I was going to New York to see a few people at the magazine business to show portfolio. And then somebody in New York said, well, if you're going to Washington, you really must see this Yoshio Komodo. Well, I didn't see him at first. I saw the casting, right out of the casting office, this heavy set literally cigar smoking in the office bureaucrat who put me to sleep. And I didn't see the charismatic guy. You never see the charismatic guy they send to the campus to grab people. You see somebody else. But while I was there, I asked someone in that office, is there a Mr. Okamoto here? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, would you ask him if he would look at my pictures? And they said, yeah, I'll show you to his office. And Yoki was the guy, he had slight Japanese American, glasses propped up on his forehead, his white sleeves rolled back, collar open. He looks at my pictures. He said, have you seen somebody at National Geographic, which was in Washington, which I didn't even realize. And I said, no. And I said, because first of all, National Geographic in the mid 60s or early 60s was not what the young photographers who they wanted to work. We wanted to work for look and life. Geographic was still a little bit boring. It wasn't just the red sweater pointing at a waterfowl, but it was not boring. It was not that exciting. But he picked up the phone. He called the legendary Robert E. Gilka, who was legendary, as I've discovered. the director of photography at Geographic, and Oki said, "Do you want to see a good people photographer?" And there was this pause. They used to have this all written down on the back of an envelope. I lost the envelope. Yeah, there was this pause, and he said, "Well, damn it, I wouldn't send him if he wasn't good." Okay, 1 o'clock tomorrow, great. Let's have lunch. Hung up the phone, changed my life.
Wow.
I went the next day at 1 o'clock. Bob Gilka, of course, acted as if he didn't know why the hell I was there. But he looked at my pictures. He said, "Well, and he also saw my resume. I was 26, about to get my degree, married with 4 children, ages 1 through 4. I was not your typical college graduate coming in. And I had a pretty good portfolio in black and white because I had tried to do subjects that would challenge me psychologically. I was doing an essay on a girl who was disabled and facing a life that would end with some kind of cancer, living in a home for much elderly people. I did a story on a mixed marriage that was not common in Minneapolis in those days.
Right.
Stories of that kind of thing. I did a never completed or successful story or essay on a black church in the lower Minneapolis Loop that took place in an old theater, and it was a real rousing kind of congregation. And even though I put prints up in the lobby, I don't think they ever truly accepted me. But these were all attempts at me to work with people, because that's what my subject interest was. Anyway, so Gilka said, "Well, I've got this summer internship. It's usually for somebody that's got a year left to go in school, but I can offer it to you, and it doesn't pay very much money, and it's all over at the end of the summer. So if you get anything else, you ought to take it." And I wasn't cocky, but it just kind of came out, and I said, "Well, Mr. Gilka, I've been broke for 5 years of school. I was a year in the fine arts school, 4 in the university, when I wanted to become a photographer. And I said, another 3 months won't kill me, and you just might want to keep me." And that just came out. And then he said, as I was leaving, he said, "Well, how do you feel about color?" And I said, "Doesn't bother me," which was totally honest. I mean, how could it bother me? I'd never worked in color, So I got home, and as soon as I got home, my lovely mentor and beloved associate professor, who was such a mentor to me, R. Smith Schooneman, he had set me up with a credit account at the Century Camera was. I went to Century and I bought a 24 exposure roll of some kind of color film. I think it's Ektachrome. I still have that. And I decided I was going to learn color. And color to me, I just think I can feel color. I don't know it. I can't explain it. I think we're all intuitively racked to color on our own ways. But color to me, I had this wonderful stage of finger painting for the first couple of years at Geographic. I mean, they sent me once I got the internship, and then of course and then at the end of the fall, they wanted to put me on contract. I'd done this story on the Amish of Pennsylvania that was a big hit, and it was published, and kind of put me on the map, and
that was your first assignment,
my
right?
first assignment. It was something I did in the summer as an intern. And the only thing it had, when I really think about it, it had intimacy. And they weren't used to publishing intimacy, Geographic at that point. So all of a sudden you've got this photographer who's going out and shooting real people with intimacy, and that's the only reason I've ever been able to think of why it worked for me. And it was the only way I knew how to work. And I still haven't changed my ways. I'm a people photographer. When I'm doing something, I approach them. I say, "Well, my name is such and such. I'm working for National Geographic." This is going back in those years. "And I'm doing this story, and I'd like you to allow me to be with you." And explain to them why I thought it was important, and I would get accepted. I'm not a great salesman. I really am not a great salesman. But somehow you have to project. There's a little bit of theatricality in photography, I think.
The best
But
the best salespeople always declare that they're not good salespeople. You see, that's
well,
the trick.
the thing is, you somehow have to project that you're not there to make them look funny. You're not there to take advantage of them
Or objectify them.
or objectify them. Yeah,
Yes.
right. So,
Right.
and that's how my career got started, and it's been that way all for 50 years, and I loved it. I loved not knowing. You know, I never went out with a shot list. Oh, you got to do this, you got to do that. This is where the flaneur part comes up. I just want to go out. I don't want to direct. I want to react to what I see. And with the Geographic, I could do it because they gave me the time to do it. You know, and
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Guys, before we move on to the next picture. Our chat is going crazy here, and I love it. Lots of good people from everywhere. We have people from Minnesota. We have people from Oregon. We have people from Georgia. We have people from Brazil. So it's blooming, and we have a couple of questions. The first one would be from Kathleen. Kathleen asks, how were you able to gain access to the Hutterite community in Montana? These photos are very special.
Well, thank you. I didn't get her name again, but
Kathleen.
Kathleen, I want to thank you for that question. And it's a real good question, because the Hutterite story was also the story that opened up my love for the American West, because they were in Montana. Geographic, because I had done a story on the Amish in 1964. In 1969, the Geographic asked me, somebody had suggested a story about a group called the Hutterites, which is a religious group. The Hutterites are one of 3 Anabaptist groups in America, the other one being the Brethren, which I know nothing about, and then the Mennonites. And I didn't know anything about the Hutterites, but they said, why don't you go out and explore and find out if you think it's a story we should do. So there are Hutterite colonies. The difference between the Hutterites and the Amish, the big difference is the Hutterites are communal. They live in colonies. The Amish live in individual farms. The Hutterites live on a colony, might be 50 people, might be 100 people. They all eat common dining rooms. All the people have their individual jobs on the colony. The women wear the long dresses. The men wear the suspenders, and when they're after they've married, they grow their beards. Wonderful people. But I knew there were colonies in 3 provinces in Canada. I knew there were some, I thought, in Minnesota, maybe South Dakota, and Montana. And I visited a number of them, and I came back and I told the Geographic editors, I said, I think this could be a very nice story. I think it'll be harder than the Amish, because I'll have to enter these colonies, and you have to be accepted by more than just one family. And I said, I think rather than going all over the place, I'd like to pick 1 or 2 colonies in Montana, which I did. And one of the first colonies was the Prize Creek in central Montana, near Stamford, Montana. And the boss then was a man named Joe Stahl, one of the toughest men I've ever worked around. I always felt I was kind of walking on eggshells with Joe, because I had to come onto that colony and I introduced myself, my name, who I worked for, the magazine. I think I brought them probably a beat up, by the time I was done, a beat up copy of the magazine with my Amish work in it. And for whatever reasons, they accepted me. I remember Joe Stahl told me, he said, he was a tough man. He said, we don't lie around here. We don't cheat. We don't do this. We don't do that. If you got anything else in mind, get on the road. Otherwise, let's go look at the sheep. And we looked at the sheep, and they gave me they provided me with a wonderful lunch. I think we had deer chops that afternoon or something. And that's how that started. And that group has become not the same people, because some of them have passed away, but it's like I have a second family among the Hutterites. I don't know if I answered that question well enough. Why they accepted me, I don't know. You'd have to ask them. I did get one really fine compliment by the boss at one colony. He's long dead now. And he told someone, he said, "I have never met a man who fit in with us so well with us like him," meaning me. Mm. And I don't know, because again, I said, you don't act. You just are who you are, you know.
It's interesting that you started our conversation tonight with the theme of acceptance, and it's been confirmed over and over and over on every picture, every story, every tale, like that's always present. This theme of acceptance and the importance of being accepted to do what you have to do.
Right. Because as I said earlier, you have to have access. Now, I've never been a hard journalist, covered a lot of news, very, very little over my career. But getting access is great. But once you're inside, being shown that acceptance is just takes another level completely. As I said, most of my best pictures were given to me.
All right, so Carl is another friend of Lumino, and today he posted about this event on his Facebook group. Thank you, Carl. And he asks, he asked to you, Bill. So if you could have one, and it's more like a technical question, if you could have one camera and one lens to go somewhere you don't know anything about, which one would be? Which pair would be?
A camera and a lens that worked. basically. I mean, my working cameras over the years, I've basically been a Leica person. I've used Nikon and Canon over the years too, but my working tools would be a camera with a 35, a 28, maybe a 50 lens, because I think a 50 millimeter lens on a 35 millimeter camera is a very good disciplined lens. It really makes you select a little finer. 35, it's a little looser. 28, looser yet. And I'm kind of wary of the wider lenses, unless you're Eugene Richards or someone who specializes in wide angles. They're harder to use well. You know, you hear somebody says, "Oh, I'm getting it all." Are you really? You're getting it all. Is it all connected? Is it all working geometrically? And that's something that I can't say, okay, it works this way because, but God damn it, you can tell when it works. Mm-hmm. And I think those would be my working optics. 50, 35, and 28. And possibly a Triumph motorcycle. Now, those were the fat years. I remember one of the top editors called me into his office one day. He was one of the top editors. And I had done the Hutterite story. And I had written it. And I'd written like I wanted to be let's get one thing straight. I wanted to be a writer long before I wanted to be a photographer. And I was in art school. I had no burning ambition, nor probably did I have the talent to be a painter. Plus, you don't paint the first year in a fine art school anyway. It was Minneapolis School of Fine Arts that I went to, which I think is still in existence in Minneapolis. I wanted to be a writer. So after 1 year in the art school, I transferred to the University of Minnesota, and I thought journalism school. But so I ended up writing the Hutterite story, and then I had this editor call me up to his office one day, and he said, "How would you like to do a story on the U.S.-Mexican border?" It was 1970. And I remember saying, I think I said to him, well, sure, as long as you don't want me to make it look like the great place to send your kids for the summer, because it's a kind of a rough-edged body of land there along the U.S.-Mexican border. It's on one side, it's full of brothels. It's got a lot of things that go with the border country. And then I was in a motorcycle mode. I think I had a Kawasaki 500 or something that I bought in Montana, and the Hutterites had crated it up for me and put it on a train to Baltimore. And I got it in Baltimore and crated it and rode it home to where I lived in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. So I was in a motorcycle mode. So I told this top ranking editor, I said, well, what I'd really like to do is do it by motorcycle. And he said, great idea. Great idea. I couldn't believe he thought he'd bought it that easily. And nobody else could. And I could have bought any motorcycle made known to man. And I remember, I'm no mechanic. I can change the tire on my car, but that's about it. And I remember probably the most reliable motorcycles in 1970 were probably the BMWs, but they were fat and kind of ugly. And the last thing I wanted was an ugly motorcycle. And the Harley Davidson, Honda had just come out with a big 4-cylinder motorcycle, which of course way beyond my mechanical abilities. And I opted for the Triumph. Could have bought any motorcycle going. I bought that motorcycle or Geographic bought it in Baltimore for $1,350. So once I had the bike, I took it to the boys in the machine shop. Geographic had a custom machine shop down on the second floor. And I brought the bike in. I said, can you guys build me something to carry 2 of these, what we called Halliburton aluminum cases in the back, for equipment and clothes, whatever. And I left it with them because I went off on some assignment. I was freelancing, so I think I had an assignment for Fortune magazine to go somewhere. And then when I came back, I found they had made this beautiful rig out of tube steel, which of course they chromed, with these Halliburton cases with black English leather straps over the top. They're just beautiful. And one day I was in the machine shop. And I asked Mike, the foreman of the machine shop, remember now this motorcycle cost $1,350. I said, Mike, how much you think you got on that really nice luggage rack? And he figured with man hours about $1,200. just a little less than the cost of the motorcycle. Those
Well
were
worth
the
it.
days.
Well worth it. Well worth it.
But then I heard later too that one of the other top editors had lost a son in a motorcycle accident and was deadly against. He was supposedly quoted saying, this magazine is not going to have some photographer on a motorcycle. So I got on the bike. I got the hell out on my assignment before they could stop me. And it worked out fine.
Well, your Twitter fans and Instagram fans are going to tar and feather us unless we have you talk about this next photo that Rodrigo put up, or even this one. This is beautiful.
Well, that's the one that kind of put me on the map. That was the lead picture of the Amish story I did. I was an intern, and it was published the next year. I think it was in August of probably 65. And I just visited that man and his sister not too long ago, a year ago, I think.
Really?
Yeah, they have since left the church, but they're still go to church, but they're no longer horse and buggy old order Amish. And I'd been the afternoon with he and his father. They were working on some fencing, and the boy told me he wanted to show me his pet guinea pig. So after we were done, I went in the back in the barn. He showed me this pet. It's a very simple story, but you look at the details. Each of his suspenders is put together with a safety pin. He's got a kind of a daggled bandage on one finger that he's banged up, and then he's holding that gentle little guinea pig, and his smooth complexion, and it's just a photograph of real innocence, naivete.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's beautiful.
Great photo.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, this is
Well,
This
this is probably maybe my most iconic photograph. It's certainly probably the one that people who like my work are most fond of. Two Basque girls running down a road in Bihorligi, France, in the Basque country of France, which I went to. I got the assignment because some other photographer had it and called into Geographic and said he was not going to do it because he wanted to go to a film school somewhere. And I had just resigned a staff position at Geographic. And this was offered me as my first freelance assignment for the magazine.
wow.
And it's a wonderful region. I also, not long ago, visited those two girls who are in the picture.
no kidding.
That's in a little village called Bihorligi. And I was standing along that right side where you see those fence posts leaning. To the right on that slope is a vineyard. And I was looking down on that vineyard, photographing the vineyard. And then I heard a voice coming from the village. What you see in the background is a white steeple of the church. But I heard a woman's voice calling. And evidently she was calling her children home because it was getting to be dusk. And then I heard this little pitter patter kind of in the background. And I turned and I saw these two little children, these two girls, running or skipping. They're almost floating down the road going home. And I turned with my Leica and I made two exposures. And I remember getting that rare feeling that, if I got that, that could be something special.
Wow.
And of course, in those days, I'm shooting film, turning my film in, mailing it in by DHL or whatever, and I wouldn't see it for months. When I got back, I looked at those two frames. The first one was totally blurry, useless. I threw it away. I wish I hadn't. I wish I'd kept it. And the other was this one, which was just a treasure, just an absolute.
Bill, when I first saw this picture, and I wonder if people who are watching this would agree, when I first saw this, I thought it was a painting. I really did. I had no idea that it was a photograph. And how in the world did you get that?
Well, first of all, Denise, I hesitate. I want to say thank you, but it's not a photograph. It's not a painting. It's a photograph. It's a photograph.
I'm aware of that. I'm aware of that.
And when it's printed properly, it has such a wonderful feeling. It is painterly. I do not deny that. And it's a very special photograph, very special moment. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Beautiful. Let's move to the next, which is another one.
The late Brian Morris. He was a buckaroo boss of the Circle A Ranch in Nevada, near Winnemucca, Nevada. He was quite a buckaroo, which is in Nevada and Oregon and parts of Idaho. They call them cowboys, but they call them buckaroos, which is a bastardization of the Spanish vaquero.
Huh.
The Mexicans who brought up all the skills and showed them to us in America, the cowboying skills. They were vaqueros, but we made it out of that. We got buckaroo. And Brian Morris was, and I'd met him about 10 minutes before I made this photograph. He and four of his buckaroos had just come back after being out on a drive for about 4 days, mostly in the rain. He's sitting at the end of a bar in a little hamlet called Paradise Valley, Nevada. And what got me into photography really is the human face. It's the human face that I've always been intrigued with. And what I think drew me into photography to begin with.
Well,
He
as you would say,
he passed away a few years ago.
He gave you a nice photograph. I mean, even though you had just met him, what a connection in such a short period of time.
Yeah.
All right, let me bring some questions from the audience before we continue. We have a couple more here. We have more people from Thailand, more people from Oregon, more people from Montana. So beautiful audience tonight.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome to Lumino.
Yeah, it's a fun stream. So okay, so one of the questions here that I thought was really interesting was well, first of all, the main I think the main question here in the chat is, how did you get the wild horses to accept you?
What wild horses?
Well, the wild horses from your pictures, right? So let me see who brought.
I don't know that I have wild horses in my pictures, to tell you the truth.
See, there you go. There's your.
The other thing I should let people know is that I did, for a while, I carried my own saddle, but I am not a horseman. Was not then and am not now a horseman. I can stay on a good horse, a decent horse, and it seemed appropriate for a while to carry my own saddle and gear. But there is a big difference between being able to ride a horse and being a real horseman, and that I am not. But I never had a subject where I photographed wild horses. I was in one of my pictures. It's actually a picture of me. In the background was Brian Morris, the one we just saw a portrait of, sitting on his horse with a Mustang he had roped out on the range, and the Mustang's lying on the ground. And they later named that horse after me. They call it Whiskey Bill.
Oh.
I showed up at their camp just before dark, way out in the middle of the high desert.
Plunder Whiskey Bill.
I showed up once looking for them, and his father loaned me a horse and told me approximately where he thought they were. And I was foolish enough to think I could get out there and find him, and I did. And when I rode up to their camp, I could only see their light, one lantern in the distance, and that was how I found them. And Brian said to me, well, he had this great drawl. And I was carrying a bottle of Maker's Mark with me, and I pulled up in front of his tent, and he looks at me and said, well, Bill, you crazy bastard. He was quite a guy.
Okay, so to be fair, Jeannie, who asked the question, put a question mark right after wild. So it was implied that the horses weren't wild by default. The other question I have here is to you, Bill, is how did you create the balance between making images and family home life? How did you balance that whole?
Oh, that is a very good question, and I don't know I don't know how well you can make that balance. It's, that's a line of work. When you are in something that you really love to do, there's always going to be a price, and there are going to be some other people that are going to pay part of that price. For instance, I had 4 young children growing up when I was working in the 60s and 70s. I had my youngest son from the second generation, gone a lot when he was growing up. The difference between those two, the group of children, the first 4, and then Anthony, was that I probably spent more time individually with Anthony because he grew up alone. On the other hand, the other children had me as a much younger man. There's a trade-off. But in that line of work, it's tough because you are going to be gone a lot. I don't remember then. The longest I was ever gone on an assignment, I think I had, this were the early days of Geographic, where the assignments were long because you literally didn't have a budget, and you kind of worked out there until you were done. And I try to break my assignments up into 2 periods, a first period and a second. Maybe it would be based on seasonal. Maybe I'd go in the spring and then again in the fall or whatever. The longest time I ever put in on one assignment would have been 5 to maybe close to 6 months. That would have been Peru. and I would have divided that up, you know. And of course, those kinds of assignments went out of fashion a long, long time ago because of budget constraints.
Sure.
Yeah.
All
Not
right,
sure if that was a good answer for her or not.
let's move back to the pictures, and we have this one right now.
Benedetta Buccellato. That was made in Sicily. I was doing I was working on an essay about Sicily, and I was in Syracuse, which is in the northeast area. And I had heard that they were going to put on some classic Greek plays in some ruins, some ancient ruins. And I remember I didn't have the proper credentials to get in through this gate where people would come in. But I saw an American model who I'd known from in 1988 when I was working in Paris on a kind of fashion world story for Geographic. And she gave me credentials and I was able to get in. And it was right around dusk. And all these actors were around in back of the ruins in costume. And I remember the play I can't remember the name of the play, but it had a kind of a World War II atmosphere to it in the clothing and the garb. And then I saw this one woman dressed all in black with this black veil and these red lips. And she was walking back and forth, just kind of getting into character. I've been around theater enough to know that's what she was doing. And I think then I was never a telephoto type photographer, but I may have had a 180 lens on a Nikon or a Canon now. One of the rare times that I would use a lens of that length. So when she was walking, I very discreetly stepped in front of her a few paces away. You know, I don't know, maybe it would be 10, 12 feet away or so. And as she walked towards me, I slowly walked backward and made it just a few frames, just a handful of pictures. And as I did that, and as I closed, I stepped aside, I said, grazie, and nodded to her. She nodded at me, and that was it. That was our total communication. And that photograph ended up being on the cover of the magazine, on the cover of one of my books. And again, photograph that was given to me, basically. I didn't ask her to do anything. I didn't ask her permission. I probably should have, but I didn't. And somehow I didn't offend her by doing that. And I was given that photograph.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Stan Kendall in Mountain City, Nevada. Somebody asked me, do you use a red filter on that picture? Because there's so much red. But I said, no, but look, Stan's in a red shirt. The bar's got red wainscoting on it. The tops of all the bar stools are red. The curtains on the windows in the background are red. The damn room is almost bleeding. It's so red, you know. And then there's this tremendous blast of sunlight coming in. And it's an incredibly impossible situation, photographically, technically. So you just go with it. And I don't know that I made more than 2 frames of this. There are many cases that I've not worked a situation maybe longer than I should have. Partly because I don't want the image to go away. You know, you can't just beat a picture to death. You can take what you can get and do it as well as you can, and then move on.
I've got a question for you, and please remember, I'm not a photographer.
Well, I can't forgive you for
that. But you know, a lot of hay is made over the transition to digital, and maybe you could talk a bit about, you know, your work during a time when there was no delete button.
Yeah.
You know, where you had
Well,
to
no
wait,
delete button, no
and
frame in the back of the camera where you could see the picture. Of course
You
not.
rewind and hope for the best.
I
right.
mean,
And
the question boils down to, do I miss film? In
Well,
one particular way, I do. Now, you know, look, anybody today, for how long now has it been that anybody can go out and make a properly exposed, properly focused picture? I mean, that's been impossible not to be able to do for quite a while. I switched to digital in 2005 because number one, Kodak was discontinuing my tools that I'd had for so long, the Kodachrome films. I didn't want to go switch over to Velvia films, the Fuji films, which were a little more electric than I preferred. You know, when you have a tool like a color film, the early Kodachromes you could almost paint with those films. They were so natural, so normal, so unpumped. But I switched to digital, and I really appreciate the abilities that digital has given us, really, and very much. But there's one thing I miss, and that is back in the film days when I was working for Geographic, I might be out for a month or two, easily go out for a month or two. And in that time away, I would have made shipments of film to the Geographic, which they would then take to the Kodak labs and process. And I would get film reports. Oh yeah, such and such a subject is good. For the early years, they actually would occasionally send a possible sample frame from the roll, particular roll, if it was expendable, and say, this is good. Most of these were too light or whatever. But what I kind of miss is that when I would come back and go up to the office in Washington and look at my film, first of all, I'd try to look at the rejects or the bad stuff to get the bad feelings out of the way. I don't know that I'd look at the selects first. But when I did look at some of my work and come across those real special frames, it was kind of like receiving a gift from afar after a long time. I don't know if you can understand that, but it was very much that way. Very special. Yeah.
I have to, before we move on too much farther, I have to give you a shameless plug for your prints. And you, when you spoke about digital and your conversion to digital, we talked earlier before the stream about your prints. And they are, in fact, digital prints, but they're printed on archival paper.
On archival paper, yeah.
They're pencil signed by you.
Yeah, these
and they happen to have
prints.
you and your DNA all over them.
Yeah, yeah.
And I just happen to say I think that's really admirable in a day of volume where you take the time, the way you would with a dye transfer print or a C print.
Yeah.
Or, so it makes a big difference, I think.
Well, there's similarities.
Analysis.
I sit next to my friend Robert Llewellyn, who's a photographer and artist, and lives exactly 1 mile down the road from me. And we go over and I have him adjust the color the way I want it. And then we print it out on this archival sheets, eight images, if they're the size of my flash prints, which are a 6x9 image on a 9x11 piece of paper, 8 to a sheet. And then I spent a lot of back-breaking hours bent over that big table at Bob Llewellyn's. There used to be with an X-Acto knife. Now he's found a paper cutter that I can do a little bit faster. But there's still a lot of handwork involved. And of course, I ID and I don't number them. They're not numbered. but I ID them and put the year where it was and sign them in pencil. Yeah, and I've really, really enjoyed being able to do that because I sell larger prints, but you know, the flash print is going to be $100. If you want a 13 by 19 print, the same image, that's 3,000. And there's not a whole lot of people that will make that jump. There's a lot of people who will go for that small print because it's a lovely print. And what I feel good about is here I can offer somebody access to a little piece of art, and I consider them little pieces of art, at a very affordable price. You know, they're not going to be able to go 3,000. I still sell a few large prints to a dealer in Santa Fe or whatever, but not a whole lot, not as much as probably some photographers do.
Well,
But
you are a piece
flash
of
print sales have been just a wonderful experience for me.
Well, Bill, you are a piece of art, and if I can say so, and it really has been a pleasure to talk to you, and from everybody here at Lumino and across the ocean in London, our colleague Rodrigo, we just want to thank you for spending this time with us.
So you're saying it's over, huh?
Well, we can listen. I mean, we can go all night.
No.
You know, I mean, that's fine. We'll go as long as you want to go.
No, it's been my pleasure indeed, and I thank you so much for inviting me to do this.
And I should tell our viewers and listeners that it's in the works. We're sort of germinating this idea in the future when travel is safe to have you lead very intimate photo intensives
Would love
at
to do
our
that.
facility in Minneapolis.
Would love to
And
do that.
what a treasure that would be for people to get to learn the art of connecting with another person and having them give you the image as opposed to you going and taking it. And I think
we'll have horses and everything. We'll have horses. Yeah.
No, we don't need to have horses. We don't need I work in the city as well. Look at my Paris work. I work very well in the city.
All right. So, Bill, thank you so much. Just as Denise said, it was a real pleasure. I would thank everyone in the chat. Thank you so much. And guys, to watch more of these, go to luminocenter.com, sign up for our newsletter so we can tell you when the next one is coming. So far, we've been bringing one every week. And Bill, I have to tell you, yours is the most popular to date. You
don't say that to everybody?
It's sold out, completely sold out.
Well, again, let me thank Rodrigo and Bill and Denise, all of you, all three of you very much. It's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Goodbye, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye,
Bye.
Bye.